The great hall stretched for miles, its crystal walls reflecting light from 1,000 distant stars. Jiho sat in the back corner, so far from the center stage that he needed a magnification device to see the speakers clearly. This was where humanity always sat, in the corners, in the shadows, where no one had to look at them. Beside him, Hana adjusted her uniform and checked her datapad for the third time in 10 minutes. Her military training showed in every movement, precise and controlled. On his other side, Daehyun leaned back in his chair, his eyes scanning the massive crowd of alien delegates. They had done this many times before. They knew what to expect. The Galactic Council met once every 1,000 years. Every species that belonged to the civilized galaxy sent representatives. The hall filled with creatures of every imaginable form. Some walked on legs, others floated in containment fields. Some breathed oxygen, others required methane or pure energy. The diversity was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. At the center of the hall, the council leaders sat on their elevated platforms. The Vethrak representative towered above everyone else, its crystalline body refracting light into rainbow patterns. Next to it, the Ulmaran delegate floated in a sphere of psychic energy, its thoughts occasionally bleeding into the minds of nearby species. The Draxel Collective sent a hive mind unit, hundreds of small creatures moving as one perfect organism. These were the powers of the galaxy, the great civilizations that had ruled for millions of years. They made the laws. They controlled the trade routes. They decided who mattered and who did not. Humanity did not matter. The Vethrak speaker's voice boomed through the hall, translated instantly into every known language. We gather at a time of prosperity. The galaxy knows peace. Commerce flows freely. Our borders remain secure. Jiho almost laughed at that. Peace. He thought about the reports he had read that morning. 3 minor species wiped out in territorial disputes. 2 more enslaved by aggressive neighbors. Dozens of colonies destroyed by pirates that the great powers refused to stop because they operated in unimportant regions of space. Peace for the powerful. Silence for everyone else. Hana leaned close to him and whispered, "Same speech as last millennium. Same promises. Same lies." Jiho nodded but said nothing. They were being watched. They were always being watched. The great powers might ignore humanity in public, but their intelligence services never stopped monitoring the feeble species that had somehow achieved faster than light travel. 300 years ago, humanity's generation ships had limped into galactic space. The journey from Earth had taken 2 centuries. The ships were ancient, breaking down and filled with desperate colonists looking for new worlds. The Galactic Council had found them easily. They had studied humanity carefully. They had run tests. Jiho had read those tests. He had the original reports memorized. Physical strength below galactic average. No natural armor. No defensive adaptations. Fragile bone structure. Short lifespan. Mental capabilities. No psionic potential detected. Unable to interface with standard galactic technology. Limited processing speed compared to synthetic or hive mind species. Military threat assessment. Negligible. Primitive weapons. No understanding of energy warfare or dimensional tactics. Recommend Class 7 status. Class 7. The second lowest classification. Only species that had not yet achieved space travel ranked lower. The Council had given humanity 5 worlds on the edge of civilized space. Remote places no one else wanted. They had provided basic technology to help humans survive. They had sent teachers to educate humanity about galactic society. Then they had left humans alone, expecting them to fade into obscurity like hundreds of other minor species before them. But humanity had not faded. They had watched. They had learned. They had waited. A disturbance rippled through the hall. The crystalline Vethrak speaker stopped mid-sentence. Its body flickered, colors shifting rapidly. Around the hall, delegates began receiving urgent messages on their communication devices. Jiho felt his own device vibrate. He glanced down at the screen and his blood went cold. Outer Rim alert. Multiple systems reporting attacks. Unknown hostile forces. Draxel Defense Fleet dispatched. Updates to follow. Hana saw it too. Her hand moved instinctively to her sidearm. Even though weapons were forbidden in the council hall, old habits from her military days. The Ulmaran delegate's psionic sphere pulsed with agitation. Its mental voice touched every mind in the hall, speaking in thoughts rather than words. The Voidborn return. Silence crashed over the hall like a physical force. Even species that did not know the name Voidborn felt the fear that swept through the ancient civilizations. Jiho watched as the great powers so confident moments before began to panic. Daehyun pulled up historical records on his tablet. Voidborn, last seen 10,000 years ago. Extragalactic invaders, consume entire star systems. No known weakness, forced into dormancy by a coalition of ancient empires at tremendous cost. They're back, Hana whispered. After all this time, they're back. More reports flooded in. The Draxel fleet had engaged the enemy at the edge of the outer rim. The battle lasted 17 minutes. Every Draxel ship was destroyed. No survivors, no wreckage. The entire fleet simply ceased to exist. The hall erupted into chaos. Delegates shouted in hundreds of languages. Some species demanded immediate military action. Others called for evacuation of their homeworlds. The great powers argued among themselves, each trying to take control of the situation while also trying to protect their own interests first. Jiho stood up slowly. His legs felt steady beneath him even though his heart raced. He had practiced this moment in his mind for years, but he had never really believed it would come. He activated his delegate beacon, requesting permission to speak. The small light on his seat began to flash, joining hundreds of others around the massive hall. The council secretary system would queue his request along with everyone else's. Given humanity's low status, he would probably wait hours before being recognized. But Jiho activated an override code that had been given to him by Earth's High Command, a code that humanity had purchased at great cost from a minor species that owed them a favor, a code that gave him immediate speaking priority. His voice suddenly boomed through the hall's sound system, translated into every language simultaneously. Honored delegates, humanity wishes to offer assistance in this crisis. The shouting stopped. Every being in the hall turned to look at the back corner where the human delegation sat. For a moment, nobody moved. Then the laughter started. It began with the smaller species, nervous giggles that spread through the crowd. Then the great powers joined in. The Vethrak's crystalline body resonated with sounds like breaking glass. The Ulmaron's psionic laughter stabbed into minds like needles of contempt. Even the Draxel hive mind, which had just lost an entire fleet, somehow found the energy to express amusement, humanity offering help. The feeblest species in the galaxy thought they could stand against an enemy that had just destroyed the most advanced military force in civilized space. Jiho stood there, letting the laughter wash over him. His face showed no emotion. Beside him, Hana's hand clenched into a fist, her jaw tight with suppressed anger. Daehyun simply smiled, a small, sad smile that said he had expected nothing less. The Vethrak speaker's voice cut through the laughter. The Council appreciates humanity's enthusiasm, but this is a matter for civilized powers. We suggest you return to your assigned worlds and await instructions. The great civilizations will handle this threat as we have handled all threats throughout history. Jiho nodded slowly. He sat back down, his expression still unreadable. The council moved on to other speakers, other plans, other desperate strategies. Nobody looked at the human delegation again. Hana leaned close to Jiho. That went exactly as predicted, she said quietly. Jiho pulled out his communication device and typed a single word. He encrypted it with humanity's highest level security codes and sent it to 5 separate destinations across human space. The word was, remember. Within hours, that word would reach Earth. It would activate protocols that had been prepared for 3 centuries. It would set in motion events that would change the galaxy forever. But for now, Jiho sat in his corner seat and watched the great powers argue. He watched them plan strategies using tactics that humanity had already studied and found flawed. He watched them make mistakes that human analysts had predicted decades ago. And he waited. Humanity had spent 300 years being silent, being ignored, being underestimated. That silence was about to end. Hana remembered the day humanity first met the galaxy. She had been young then, barely 20 years old, fresh from the military academy on New Terra. She remembered standing on the observation deck of the generation ship Perseverance, watching as the sleek alien vessels appeared around them. Those ships had moved like nothing humans had ever seen, dancing through space with impossible grace. The Galactic Council's greeting party had been polite. They had scanned every human ship with their advanced sensors. They had requested samples of human biology, Human culture, human technology. The council's representatives had smiled and made welcoming gestures. But Hana had seen their eyes. She had seen the disappointment. Humans were supposed to be something special. Every species that achieved faster than light travel brought something unique to the galaxy. Some brought incredible strength. Others brought psionic powers or technological genius or natural weapons that defied physics. The council expected every new species to fill a role, to contribute something valuable. Humanity brought nothing special. They were just ordinary, average in every measurable way. Below average in most, the council had been kind about it. They gave humans their 5 worlds. They taught humans how to use basic galactic technology. They added human languages to the translation databases. Then they moved on to more important matters. But humanity had not wasted those 300 years. Hana's communication device buzzed. She glanced down and saw the coded message from Earth's High Command. The message she had been expecting for her entire adult life. Protocol remember is active. Report to coordinates Delta 7. Authorization code persistence. She felt her heart skip. After 3 centuries of preparation, it was finally time. Beside her, Jiho received the same message. So did Daehyun. Around the galaxy, thousands of humans in hundreds of different roles were receiving identical orders. The machinery of humanity's secret plan was beginning to move. They left the council hall quietly. Nobody noticed. Nobody ever noticed when humans left. Their ship waited in the diplomatic docking bay, a small transport that looked old and worn. Like everything humanity showed to the galaxy, it appeared barely functional. The hull needed painting. The engines made concerning noises. Other species joked that human ships held together through willpower and prayer. But once they cleared the station's scanning range, Daehyun activated the ship's real engines. The old transport suddenly accelerated to speeds that would have shocked every engineer in the council. Within minutes, they jumped to faster-than-light travel, using a method that humanity had developed independently, never sharing it with galactic authorities. Their destination was a region of space officially listed as empty. No planets, no resources, nothing worth visiting. The Galactic Council's own charts marked it as void space, but as they approached, massive structures appeared on their sensors. Space stations, shipyards, defense platforms, and ships. Thousands of ships. Hana stared at the display screen, even though she had seen this view dozens of times during training. It never stopped being impressive. This was just one of humanity's hidden bases. There were others scattered throughout the outer reaches of human space, all carefully hidden from galactic sensors. They docked at the largest station. The name painted on its hull read, Fortress Earth. Inside, the station bustled with activity. Human soldiers hurried through corridors. Engineers worked on weapon systems. Analysts studied tactical displays. This was humanity's true face, the one they never showed the galaxy. Admiral Minho met them at the docking bay. He was older than Hana, his hair gray at the temples, but his eyes burned with fierce intelligence. He had spent 30 years building this fleet, preparing for a war he hoped would never come. The Voidborn, Minho said without preamble. We've been tracking their advance. They're moving faster than the ancient record suggested. He led them to the command center, a vast room filled with holographic displays. Each display showed a different region of galactic space. Red markers indicated Voidborn attacks. Blue markers showed galactic military positions. It looked like a disease spreading through living tissue. The Council's response is exactly what we predicted, Minho continued. Every major power is pulling forces back to defend their core worlds. They're abandoning the outer rim colonies, letting the Voidborn consume the minor species first. Jiho nodded slowly. The same strategy they always use. Sacrifice the weak to save the strong, which means the Voidborn will be stronger when they reach the core systems. Hana added. They'll have consumed dozens of civilizations by then, adapted to their defenses. Learned their tactics, Minho smiled grimly. Exactly. The Council thinks they're buying time. They're actually feeding the enemy. He gestured to one of the displays. It showed a detailed analysis of Voidborn combat patterns, compiled from ancient records and recent observations. Humanity had been studying the Voidborn for centuries, preparing for the possibility of their return. They're efficient, Minho explained. They adapt quickly to any defense. Energy weapons? They develop absorption fields. Physical projectiles? They create armor. Psionic attacks? They evolved mental shields. Every civilization that fought them before made the same mistake. They tried to overwhelm the Voidborn with their greatest strength. And humanity's greatest strength? Daehyun asked, though he already knew the answer. We don't have one, Minho said. We're not the strongest or the smartest or the fastest. But we're adaptable. We learn, we improvise. We use what works, not what looks impressive. Hana walked closer to the tactical display. What's the plan? Minho pulled up a complex battle strategy. The Voidborn are heading toward the Kresh Nebula. It's the gateway to the inner colonies. If they take it, they'll have a straight path to the core worlds. The Council is sending every available ship to hold that position. And humanity? We're going to do what we do best, Minho said. We're going to cheat. Over the next hour, he explained the strategy. While the galactic forces would engage the Voidborn directly at Kresh Nebula, humanity would hit them from unexpected angles. They would use tactics the galaxy considered dishonorable. Ambushes, false retreats, asymmetric warfare. Humans would target the Voidborn's logistics, their communication networks, their resource collection systems. The galaxy fought wars like duels, honorable confrontations between equals. Humanity fought wars like they had on Earth for thousands of years. Dirty, practical, focused on winning, not glory. We have another advantage, Minho added. The Voidborn have never encountered humanity before. They've adapted to fight the great powers. They know how to counter Vethrak energy weapons and Ulmaran psionics and Draxil hive tactics, but they've never seen human warfare. Jiho studied the plan carefully. This will reveal everything we've been hiding. Every secret weapon, every hidden base, every capability we've kept classified. Once we do this, the galaxy will know we lied to them for 300 years. Yes, Minho agreed. And many species will hate us for it. They'll claim we should have helped sooner, that we let people die while we prepared. Did we? Hana asked quietly. It was the question that haunted every human involved in the long preparation. Could we have prevented other wars if we'd revealed ourselves earlier? Minho sighed. Maybe, probably. But would the galaxy have listened? Would the great powers have accepted guidance from a Class 7 species? He shook his head. We ran the simulations thousands of times. Every scenario where humanity revealed its strength too early ended badly. Either the great powers destroyed us out of fear, or they enslaved us to use our abilities for their benefit, or they simply refused to listen until it was too late. So we waited, Daehyun said. We waited until the galaxy was desperate enough to accept help from anyone. Even from humans. Exactly, Minho confirmed. The Council rejected Jiho's offer today. Tomorrow, when the Voidborn destroy another fleet, they'll still reject us. But eventually, when enough of their people have died, when enough of their pride has been broken, they'll be willing to listen. Hana felt sick. It was a cold calculation, measuring lives against probability, but she understood the necessity. Humanity had learned painful lessons throughout its history. Sometimes helping too soon was worse than not helping at all. How long do we wait? She asked. Not long, Minho said. The Voidborn advance is accelerating. Within a week, they'll reach the core territories. The Council will be drowning in casualties and desperate for any solution. He pulled up another display showing fleet positions. In the meantime, we position our forces. We place our assets where they'll do the most good, and we prepare to act the moment we're needed. A junior officer approached and saluted. Admiral, the last of our recall orders have been acknowledged. All human personnel in deep cover are returning to military status. Minho nodded. Good. What's the status of the Hammer Fleet? Fully armed and ready, sir. They're waiting at staging point Omega. Hana knew about the Hammer Fleet. It was humanity's largest military force, 5,000 ships designed specifically to fight the Voidborn. Every vessel carried weapons that the galaxy had never seen. Kinetic accelerators that could punch through adapted armor. Viral code weapons that could corrupt even alien computing systems. Psychological warfare systems designed to confuse and disorient hive mind species. The Galactic Council's emergency session had been going for 16 hours straight. Jiho watched from his corner seat as the great powers tore themselves apart with accusations and fear. 6 more systems had fallen to the Voidborn. The Vethrak Empire's Second Fleet, the pride of their military, had engaged the enemy at the Morith system. The battle lasted 43 minutes. 8,000 crystalline warriors died without inflicting a single confirmed kill on the invaders. The Ulmarans tried next. They gathered their most powerful psionic users and launched a mental assault meant to shatter the Voidborn hive mind. The attack failed completely. The Voidborn consciousness was too alien, too vast. 3 Ulmaran masters burned out their own minds in the attempt. Panic spread through civilized space faster than the Voidborn themselves. Species began evacuating their homeworlds. Trade collapsed. Ancient alliances fractured as each civilization tried to save itself first. Jiho's communication device buzzed constantly. Reports from human observers throughout the galaxy painted a picture of complete chaos. The great powers were falling apart, and they were taking everyone else with them. He received a priority message from Admiral Minho. Just 2 words. It's time. Jiho stood up and activated his delegate beacon again. This time, he didn't use the override code. He simply stood there waiting to be recognized. The council secretary, overwhelmed with thousands of requests, probably wouldn't notice him for hours, but someone else noticed. The Ulmaran delegate's psionic sphere pulsed. Its mental voice touched Jiho's mind directly. The human wishes to speak. Perhaps we should listen. We have tried everything else. The Vethrak speaker's crystalline form flickered with colors that indicated surprise. You cannot be serious. Humanity offers nothing we need. Humanity is still here, the Ulmaran replied. While our forces retreat in panic, the human colonies on the outer rim remain. Their people do not flee. Why, it was a good question, one that several species had started asking. Human settlements directly in the Voidborn's path showed no signs of evacuation. Human civilian ships continued normal trading operations. Human diplomatic staff remained at their posts while other species fled. It made no sense. Unless humanity knew something they did not. The Vethrak speaker seemed to consider this. Finally, with obvious reluctance, it acknowledged Jiho's request. The council recognizes the human delegate. Jiho walked to the speaker's platform. The long walk from the corner to the center felt like crossing an ocean. Every eye in the hall followed him. He could feel their doubt, their contempt, their desperation. He reached the platform and looked out at the assembled civilizations. Hundreds of species, thousands of delegates, every one of them more advanced than humanity. Every one of them failing to stop the Voidborn. Honored Council, Jiho began. His voice remained calm, steady. Humanity requests authorization to coordinate defensive operations against the Voidborn incursion. The hall erupted in shouting. Species that normally would never speak to each other, united in their mockery of the suggestion. A Class 7 species coordinating the defense of the galaxy? It was absurd. Jiho waited for the noise to die down. He didn't argue. He didn't defend humanity's capabilities. Instead, he simply activated a holographic display. The display showed the current military situation. Every species recognized their own forces, their own failed strategies, their own retreating fleets. But the display also showed something else, something that made the shouting stop. It showed human positions, thousands of them. Human ships, human bases, human listening posts scattered throughout the galaxy. Positions that shouldn't exist. Capabilities that humanity had never revealed. A military infrastructure that had somehow gone unnoticed for 3 centuries. How? The Vethrak speaker demanded. How do you have these forces? Our sensors never detected them. You never looked for them, Jiho replied simply. You assumed humanity was weak, so you never checked if that assumption was true. He expanded the display to show human tactical analysis of the Voidborn. 300 years of study, detailed predictions of Voidborn behavior, weaknesses identified, countermeasures developed. While you fought wars against each other, Jiho continued, humanity studied every conflict. We learned how each species fights. We identified the patterns in your tactics, the flaws in your strategies. We saw how you would respond to a threat like the Voidborn, and we prepared accordingly. A new voice entered the debate. Sora, a human strategic coordinator, appeared on the communication channels. She had been working for a Draxel corporation as a logistics analyst, a boring job that no one paid attention to. In reality, she had been mapping every trade route and military installation in civilized space. The Voidborn adapt to whatever they face, Sora explained. Her voice transmitted across every screen in the hall. They've studied your tactics for 10,000 years. They know how Vethrak forces deploy. They understand Ulmaran psionic patterns. They've adapted specifically to defeat the great powers. She brought up battle recordings from the recent engagements. Watch carefully. Every time you use energy weapons, they develop absorption. Every time you try psionic attacks, they build resistance. You're fighting the way you always fight, the way they expect you to fight. And humanity fights differently? The Vethrak speaker asked, its tone skeptical. Humanity fights to win, Sora replied. We don't care about honor duels or showing our strength. We care about destroying the enemy efficiently. She displayed human battle tactics, asymmetric warfare, hit-and-run attacks, targeting logistics instead of combat forces, psychological operations, strategies that the civilized galaxy considered beneath them. You think these crude methods will work? An Ilmaran delegate asked, its mental voice dripping with disdain. They already have, Jiho said quietly. He brought up new footage, a recording from the Helios colony, a human settlement that the Voidborn had attacked 2 days ago. The Council had assumed the colony was destroyed like all the others. They never checked. The footage showed something different. It showed human defenses holding against the Voidborn assault. It showed human weapons that actually damaged the invaders. It showed tactical coordination that forced the Voidborn to retreat. You repelled them? The Vethrak speaker's voice filled with shock. A single human colony achieved what our greatest fleets could not? We didn't repel them, Jiho corrected. We made the attack too costly to be worth their time. The Voidborn are efficient. When we made it clear that taking the colony would consume more resources than they would gain, they moved on to easier targets. He let that sink in for a moment. Every engagement you've fought has been a direct confrontation. You meet them head-on with your best forces. You try to overpower them. The Voidborn love that. It lets them adapt quickly. It lets them learn. Sora took over again. Humanity proposes a different approach. We don't meet them head-on. We harass their supply lines. We attack their resource-gathering operations. We force them to spread out, to divide their attention. We make every victory Pyrrhic. She displayed a comprehensive battle plan. It was brilliant and brutal. It used every species' strengths in ways they had never considered. Vethrak energy weapons not for direct combat but for area denial. Ulmaran psionics not for attack but for intelligence gathering. Draxil hive mind coordination not for mass assault but for precision operations. And humans. Humans everywhere filling the gaps, providing the coordination, doing the dirty work that no one else wanted to do. The Council fell silent. They were looking at a strategy that might actually work, a strategy that came from the species they had dismissed as feeble and worthless. You've been preparing for this, the Vethrak speaker said. It wasn't a question. For 300 years, Jiho confirmed. Since the day we met the galaxy, we knew that eventually, some threat would come that would require unity. Real unity, not the pretend cooperation of the Council. We prepared to be ready when that day came. Why didn't you reveal yourself sooner? An angry voice called from the assembly. Why did you let so many die before offering help? Jiho had expected this question. He had practiced the answer, but it still hurt to say it. Would you have listened? If humanity had claimed to have superior tactics 300 years ago, would the great powers have accepted guidance from a Class 7 species? Silence answered him. They all knew the truth. They would have rejected humanity, possibly violently. The galaxy's arrogance had prevented them from accepting help from those they considered inferior. We waited, Jiho continued, until the galaxy was desperate enough to listen, until pride mattered less than survival. We waited until our words would have weight. He paused. We waited until you were ready to hear us. The Ulmaran delegate's psionic presence filled the hall. And now we are ready? Now you have no choice, Jiho replied bluntly. Accept humanity's help or watch your civilizations burn. It was harsh. It was cruel. But it was honest. The Council needed to understand that this wasn't a request. Humanity was taking charge of the defense whether the great powers liked it or not. The Vethrak speaker consulted with other Council leaders. The debate lasted several minutes. Finally it spoke. The Council grants humanity temporary authorization to coordinate defensive operations.
This...
Tejan checked his boarding gear one last time. The drop pod was cramped, barely large enough for him and his 5-person team. In 30 seconds, they would launch from the assault carrier and fly directly into Hell. You ready? Asked Nari, his second-in-command. She was young, but she had already completed 6 boarding actions against Voidborn vessels, 6 more than most species attempted in their entire military careers. As ready as we'll ever be, Tejan replied. He had lost count of how many times he'd done this. 15 missions, 20. Each one felt like the last one he would survive. The mission was simple in concept, nightmare in execution. The Voidborn captured ships to study and consume technology. Those ships often still had survivors trapped inside. Galactic military doctrine said to write them off, to destroy the captured vessels before the Voidborn could extract useful information. Humanity said something different. Humanity said to go get their people back. The drop pod launched. Taijin felt the brutal acceleration slam him into his harness. Through the small viewport, he watched the Voidborn vessel grow larger. It was massive, organic, and mechanical at the same time. The surface writhed with activity. Thousands of smaller creatures flowing across the hull like insects. Their pods' stealth systems kept them invisible to Voidborn sensors. Another human innovation. The civilized galaxy fought with honor, announcing their attacks. Humans preferred to arrive unexpected. Impact. The pod's cutting lasers burned through the alien hull. Tuscan and his team poured into the breach, weapons raised. The interior of the Voidborn ship was nothing like a normal vessel. No corridors, no rooms. Just organic tunnels that shifted and changed. Living passages that tried to trap intruders. They moved fast. Speed was survival. Nari consulted her scanner, tracking the life signs of captured crew. 300 meters deeper into the ship. Might as well have been 3,000 Voidborn creatures emerged from the walls. Taijin's team opened fire with weapons specifically designed for close combat. No energy weapons that the enemy could adapt to. Just solid projectiles, fire, and blades. Primitive by galactic standards. Effective when you needed something dead. They fought through tunnel after tunnel. Taijin lost track of how many creatures they killed. His armor took damage. Warning lights flashed inside his helmet. He ignored them and kept moving. They found the survivors in a chamber that looked like the inside of a stomach. 43 people from 6 different species held in some kind of organic stasis. Most were unconscious. The lucky ones, get them out, Taijin ordered. His team worked fast, cutting through the organic bonds, dragging survivors toward the extraction point. But the Voidborn had noticed them now. The entire ship was responding, sending forces to eliminate the intruders. The walls themselves tried to crush them. Taijin set charges along their escape route, collapsing tunnels behind them to slow the pursuit. They ran. Taijin carried a wounded Vethrak soldier who was twice his size, somehow finding the strength. Behind them, explosions rocked the alien vessel. Ahead, their extraction shuttle waited at the breach point. Not everyone made it. Nari stayed behind to hold a choke point, buying time for the survivors to escape. Taijin heard her final transmission, calm and professional even as the Voidborn overwhelmed her position. Get them home, sir. That's what matters. The extraction shuttle pulled away from the dying Voidborn vessel. Taijin watched through the viewport as the ship imploded, taking Nari and who knew how many other brave soldiers with it. 43 lives saved. 1 life lost. The math was clear, but it didn't make him feel any better. Back on the command carrier, medical teams took the survivors. Most would live. Some would need extensive treatment. All of them owed their lives to humans willing to risk everything for strangers. Admiral Minho found Taijin in the ready room, staring at nothing. Another successful mission, Minho said quietly. We lost Nari. I know. She'll be remembered. Minho sat down beside him. I know this is hard. I know you're tired. But what you're doing out there matters. Those 43 people you saved today, they'll tell everyone what humanity did for them. They'll remember that humans came for them when their own governments wrote them off. Taijin nodded slowly. He understood the strategy. Every rescue mission, every sacrifice, every act of bravery was changing how the galaxy saw humanity. But understanding the strategy didn't make it easier to watch good people die. Across the galaxy, the counteroffensive continued. Jiho coordinated defensive operations from a mobile command center, working 18-hour days. The galactic forces were learning to fight effectively under human tactical doctrine, but it was a slow process. Species that had warred against each other for millennia had to learn cooperation. Ancient prejudices didn't disappear overnight. The Vethrak Empire particularly struggled with human leadership. Their culture valued individual glory in combat. The idea of coordinated operations where everyone played a small part conflicted with their warrior traditions. Jiho spent hours in negotiations with Vethrak military leaders, explaining why their honor duels were getting their soldiers killed. Some understood, many didn't, but slowly, grudgingly, they adapted. The Ulmarans adapted faster. Their psionic abilities made them excellent scouts and intelligence gatherers, roles that human tactics emphasized. They began to see the value in subtlety over direct confrontation. But as victories accumulated, tensions grew. Species began investigating how humanity had hidden so much capability for so long. They found human intelligence networks embedded in their governments. They discovered human observers in their militaries. They realized that humanity had been watching, learning, cataloging their every secret for 300 years. Some species felt betrayed. Others felt violated. All of them felt angry. Kyung-soo, a human diplomatic officer, worked overtime trying to manage the fallout. He explained that humanity had to hide to survive, that revealing their capabilities would have resulted in enslavement or destruction, that the great powers would have never allowed a Class 7 species to become their equal. "You lied to us," a Draxil representative accused during one particularly heated session. "Yes," Kyung-soo agreed. "We lied. We had to. Your civilization has a history of conquering species you consider useful and exterminating those you don't. We were determined to be neither. You made us look foolish. You made yourselves look foolish," Kyung-soo replied, his patience wearing thin. "You assumed that because we arrived in damaged ships we must be weak. You never questioned that assumption. You never looked deeper. That's on you, not us." The Draxil representative had no response to that. The truth hurt, but it was still truth. The real crisis came at the Crucible system. It was a strategic location, a natural choke point that the Voidborn had to pass through to reach the inner colonies. Sora identified it as the perfect place for a decisive battle, but she also predicted that the Voidborn would know it was a trap. They would come anyway because they had no choice, and they would come with everything they had. The Allied fleet gathered at Crucible. 10,000 ships from 100 species, all coordinated under human tactical command. It was the largest military force assembled in galactic history. The Voidborn came. They didn't just come with a fleet. They came with their entire invasion force. Thousands of vessels, millions of creatures, all focused on breaking through the Allied position. The battle lasted 6 days. Jiho barely slept, coordinating defensive positions, redirecting forces to weak points, managing logistics for an enormous combined fleet. Every hour brought new crises. Ships running out of ammunition, squadrons getting cut off, allies arguing about tactics in the middle of combat. But Sora's predictions held true. The Voidborn fought exactly as human analysts expected. When they adapted to energy weapons, the fleet switched to kinetic. When they developed psionic shields, the Ulmarans shifted to intelligence gathering. When they tried to divide the Allied forces, human coordinators kept everyone together. On the third day, humanity deployed something new. Captured Voidborn technology, reverse-engineered by human scientists who had been studying the enemy's biology for months. The weapons turned the Voidborn's own adaptive capabilities against them, creating feedback loops that disrupted their coordination. It was brutal. It was ugly. Many species questioned whether it was even ethical to use such weapons. But it worked. The Voidborn advance broke. For the first time since the invasion began, they retreated. Not a tactical withdrawal, a full retreat. They abandoned the Crucible system and pulled back to regroup. The galaxy celebrated victory. But Jiho knew better. The Voidborn hadn't been defeated. They had been delayed. They would adapt to the new weapons. They would learn from their mistakes. They would come back stronger. Still, the victory bought time. Time to prepare better defenses. Time to train more coordinated forces. Time to build the unity that would be needed for the final battles. Hana found Jiho in his quarters after the celebration ended. He looked exhausted, running on coffee and determination. "You should rest," she said. "Can't, too much to do." He pulled up reports on his screen. "We're losing the political battle. Every day more species demand answers about human deception. Some are calling for our trial after the war ends. They want to know why we didn't reveal ourselves sooner." "Let them call for whatever they want," Hana replied. The Void Gate hung at the edge of known space, a massive tear in reality through which the Voidborn had first entered the galaxy. It pulsed with dark energy, growing larger every day. If it wasn't closed, the Voidborn could bring endless reinforcements from whatever dimension they called home. Admiral Minho stood on the bridge of his flagship studying the gate through the view screen. His fleet had gathered here, 5,000 ships carrying humanity's best and bravest. Behind them, the Allied forces waited, ready to provide support. But everyone knew the truth. This was a one-way mission. "Final checks complete," reported his tactical officer. "All ships report ready," Minho nodded. He thought about the soldiers under his command. Many of them had families back on Earth and the colonies. Most of them knew they weren't coming home. They came anyway. Open fleet-wide communications, Minho ordered. His face appeared on screens throughout the fleet. Thousands of humans looked back at him waiting for his words. 300 years ago, Minho began, our ancestors arrived in this galaxy as refugees, weak, desperate, barely surviving. The great civilizations took one look at us and decided we didn't matter. We were too fragile, too ordinary, too unremarkable. He paused, letting that sink in. They were wrong. Not about our physical strength or our technology or our special abilities. They were wrong about what makes a species matter. They thought power determined value. They believed that only the strong deserved respect. But we knew something they didn't. We learned it the hard way over thousands of years of human history. Real strength isn't about being the biggest or the fastest or the most advanced. Real strength is about standing up when everyone else runs away. It's about protecting those who can't protect themselves. It's about doing what's right even when it's hard. On the view screen, Minho could see the void gate growing brighter. The Voidborn were sending something through, responding to the human fleet's presence. Today we prove that humanity matters, Minho continued, not because we're better than anyone else, but because we're willing to pay the price that needs paying. Behind us is a galaxy full of people who deserve to live, people who deserve a future, and we're going to give them that future. He smiled, and it was a genuine smile full of pride. It's been an honor serving with you all. Now let's finish this. The fleet moved forward. The Voidborn emerged from the gate in massive numbers, thousands of ships pouring into normal space. They had learned from their defeats, adapted their tactics, prepared specifically to counter human strategies. Minho's fleet didn't try to win the battle. They tried to reach the gate. The fighting was brutal beyond description. Ships died every second. Tajin led boarding parties against impossible odds, buying time for others to advance. Human pilots flew suicide runs, crashing their vessels into Voidborn command ships. Entire squadrons sacrificed themselves to clear paths through enemy formations. And slowly, meter by meter, the human fleet advanced. On Fortress Earth, Jiho watched the battle through tactical displays. He had argued against this mission. He had begged Minho to find another way, but they both knew there wasn't another way. The gate had to be closed, and closing it required someone to fly into it with enough explosive force to collapse the dimensional tear. Beside Jiho, Hana stood silent. She had fought in many battles, but this was different. This was watching friends die in real time, knowing you couldn't help them. Admiral Minho's flagship has reached the gate, reported a tactical officer. His voice shook slightly. On the screen they watched as Minho's ship, along with 300 others that had survived the journey, flew directly into the void gate. The ships carried massive fusion weapons, enough power to tear a hole in space itself. Minho transmitted one final message. Not to the fleet, to the galaxy. This is Admiral Minho of the human fleet. We came to your galaxy 300 years ago as the weakest species you had ever seen. Today we leave it as free people who chose their own fate. Remember that weakness is not the same as powerlessness. Remember that the quiet ones are often the strongest. And remember that humanity spoke when it mattered most. The weapons detonated inside the gate. The explosion was visible across half the galaxy, a blinding flash that temporarily overwhelmed every sensor. When the light faded, the void gate was gone. So was Minho's fleet. So were 3,000 of humanity's best people. But the gate was closed. The Voidborn were cut off from their reinforcements. The battle turned. The remaining Voidborn forces, suddenly isolated and unsupported, began to collapse. The Allied fleet, inspired by humanity's sacrifice, pressed their advantage. Within hours, the Voidborn were in full retreat. Within days, they were pushed back beyond the galactic rim, trapped in the empty space between galaxies. The war was over. The celebrations lasted for weeks. Every species in the galaxy honored their dead and praised their heroes. But the loudest celebrations were for humanity, the species that had paid the highest price for victory. Jiho attended memorial services on dozens of worlds. He gave speeches praising the fallen. He accepted thanks from species that had once mocked humanity. And inside he felt hollow. 3,000 humans dead in a single mission. Thousands more throughout the war. Entire colonies destroyed. Generations of sacrifice finally revealed and spent in months of brutal warfare. Was it worth it? Jiho didn't know. He suspected he would never know. The Galactic Council reformed in the ruins of the old meeting hall. Half the great powers were gone or drastically weakened. New species rose to fill the power vacuum. And in the center of the hall, where once only the strongest sat, there was a new seat. A seat for humanity. Jiho took his place there, no longer in the corner, no longer ignored. Beside him sat Hana, now promoted to lead humanity's military coordination. Kyungsu represented human diplomatic interests, and a dozen other humans filled positions throughout the council's structure. The new council's first session was about the future. What would the galaxy become after the war? How would they prevent such disasters in the future? Who would lead and how? Jiho spoke first, not as a supplicant requesting permission, as an equal demanding attention. The old system failed, he said bluntly. It failed because it valued power over wisdom. It failed because the strong made rules that benefited themselves while ignoring everyone else. It failed because species like humanity were dismissed as irrelevant, based on superficial judgments. He looked around the hall, meeting the eyes of delegates from species that had once laughed at him. We propose a new charter. One where every species, regardless of their physical capabilities or technological level, has an equal voice in governance, where decisions are made based on merit, not strength, where protecting the weak is valued as much as celebrating the powerful. The proposal sparked immediate debate. Some species supported it enthusiastically, especially the minor powers who had suffered under the old system. Others resisted, particularly those who benefited from the previous hierarchy. But the debate was respectful. People listened. They considered. They negotiated. The old arrogance was gone, replaced by a hard-earned humility. The new charter passed by a significant majority. It wasn't perfect. Nothing created by politics ever was, but it was better. It was fairer. It gave every species a chance to be heard. Months later, Jiho returned to Earth for the first time since the war began. He stood in the park where he had played as a child, looking up at the stars that held so much pain and promise. Bowman, his niece, found him there. She was 6 years old, full of questions about the uncle who had been gone for so long. "Did you really save the whole galaxy?" she asked, her eyes wide with wonder. Jiho smiled sadly. "A lot of people saved the galaxy. I just helped coordinate them. But you were in charge, right? You told everyone what to do? Sometimes, when they were willing to listen." He knelt down to her level. "Do you know what the hardest part was? Not fighting the aliens, not winning battles. It was getting people to work together, getting them to see past their differences and focus on what mattered." Bowman thought about that seriously. Did they learn? Some did. Some are still learning. It's a slow process. He looked back at the stars. But at least they're trying now. "That's something. When I grow up, I want to go to space," Bowman declared. "I want to see all those other aliens and planets." "You should," Jiho encouraged. "The galaxy needs people who want to understand, not just dominate. People who listen before they speak." On another world, Hana supervised the training of a new generation of human soldiers. But these soldiers were different from the ones who fought the Voidborn. These soldiers trained alongside warriors from dozens of species. They learned each other's tactics, shared their experiences, built friendships that crossed species lines. The old walls were coming down. Slowly, painfully, slowly. But they were coming down. Kyungsu worked in the new Department of Minor Species Advancement, helping civilizations that had been ignored by the old council. He coordinated aid packages, negotiated trade agreements, ensured that the galaxy's promise of equality actually reached everyone. And throughout the galaxy, humans continued their work. No longer hiding, no longer silent, but also not dominating or controlling. They had learned the lesson that the great powers forgot. True leadership meant serving others, not ruling them. Years passed. The wounds of war healed, though the